So basically, this is my my mechanic. It is a ragdoll system that is able to be used while the character is being animated. So got a couple of demos here you can basically see. Each one relies on like a puppet master, which is a static animated like figure, and then a puppet. The puppet isn't actually animated, it's got a script on each joint that tries to mirror the puppet master. So you can see here we have the puppet master, which is just walking normally, and then the puppet, which is trying to mirror it, but it's being influenced by a cube in the world. So obviously it's on a slight angle. And then we have the same thing here with a puppet being like influenced by this big hammer here. And we've got 3 spawners set up in the scene. So if I spawn one actor on each one, you can see they basically use a nav mesh system built in Unity for the AI to calculate which way it's running. So basically it's got 2 states. So it has like an animated state where it mirrors the master, and then it has basically a full ragdoll state where it's got a game like a character manager on it, and when it detects that the character has had too much force applied to it, it basically detaches it and stops animating it. And the main benefit to this system is that you can apply force to it, and as long as it's not beyond a certain amount, it'll continue to like animate, but it'll interact with its surroundings. So for example, you could have a character in the game shooting at one of these, and it'll still move as you would expect it to until obviously it's got too much force applied, which you can change in the editor. I've also got a spawner script set up here, so I can add like a 60 frame delay in between each spawn. We can start the spawners and then spawn many in at once. If we stop them there, you'll see that the ragdolls actually interact with the other ragdolls. So if one of the ragdolls hits one of the characters that's not fully ragdolled at a certain force, it'll basically kill that one as well. And this basically means that you can have like big pile-ups, and it makes it look a lot more realistic than like, I mean, you can see here with them rolling down. And it seems to be fairly effective. Like there's no major performance difficulties. Like we've got 66 active physics objects in the game at the minute, and we're getting a steady frame rate. I've also got an explosion force here, which is basically just a global force set up in Unity. This could be anything, like from, you know, just a general force applied from like a gunshot. But just for an example, I've got an explosion set up. So if we trigger the explosion, you can basically see that like this force it's not being applied directly to each character. It's like a general explosion, like a global explosion I've got set up. And you'll be able to see that if we leave it running for a little while, you actually get a fairly realistic looking like interpretation of what it would be if you had this many, you know, if it was in the real world and you had these objects. Like, I mean, see like the hammer's carving like a big channel down the middle, and you've got these ones here in the middle that are actually sat underneath the arm of the hammer. And you can see that it actually looks fairly realistic when it starts piling up. And yeah, like the way the ragdolls move on this ramp as well. But also the way that the explosion forces work looks fairly realistic. When you get over a certain amount, I mean, we've got 300 ragdolls at the minute and we're getting 56 frames per second, which isn't too bad. But yeah, I mean, it's when you get to a certain amount, obviously it will start to have performance difficulties. So I might look at in the future a system for like to basically turn these into a static mesh, and basically remove all of the physics calculations from them, because like obviously all these ones here are still, you know, still doing physics calculations on them, which isn't necessary. So this mechanic aims to look at and explore like the ragdoll system that's used in a lot of games these days. A lot of games, you know, like Call of Duty, like with the zombies modes and that sort of thing, they have like ragdoll systems, but obviously due to performance issues, they despawn the ragdolls after a certain amount of time. So I wanted to try and create something that used the physics system in Unity, which I hadn't really looked at before, and basically try and create something that, you know, was able to create ragdolls and give like an immersive and sort of realistic looking effect. Originally I was just wanting to create a ragdoll that you could move around like in the editor, maybe with the mouse, and it would just, you know, you could hit it against objects and it would react as you would expect it to in the scene. And what I've ended up creating is like a reasonably complex AI with the nav mesh system. I'm quite happy with it. There's still a long way I would like to go with it if I was to carry it on further. The testing wasn't as organised as I would have liked looking back. It had, like, obviously tested it as I was going along. Every time I made a small change, I would run it in the editor and like play around with it and see how, you know, how it felt. Like, I had to make sure I got the springiness and the dampening on the joints right, so that it wouldn't look like it was a ragdoll trying to mirror it, and it would look like it was being like directly animated. So definitely looking back, I would like to have a more strict and like professional looking test plan. I've also learned that the system is not designed to be put into a final game. I mean, obviously it is, but the system's designed to be like, it's something that I could sell on the asset store, and people who are making games that would rely on this technology could use. So definitely in the editor I need to make it look cleaner and try and get everything a lot more self-contained, because currently, like, if you were to, like, say you want to change the character model out, it's quite a lot of work at the moment, so I would definitely want to have something where it's just a case of drag and drop, because it's definitely something that could be used, but it wouldn't be very easy to just, you know, without much experience doing this, to be able to go and just set it up on another character in a different context. The design and development process itself went fairly smoothly. I've done a lot of work in C# and in Unity already, so that's not something I was very weak in, so I was able to do a lot there without much research. The initial designs could definitely have been a lot clearer. Like, I did a lot, I mean, obviously it evolved a lot as it was going along, but it's definitely something I would have liked to have, you know, maybe a more clear design document from the outset, so I knew what I was doing, didn't end up, you know, trailing off and spending days working on something that ended up not making it into the final version of the mechanic. Definitely the use of physics in Unity is something I'd never really touched on before, so I mean, that's the main reason I wanted to go with a physics-based project, was just to improve my skill set, and I definitely think I've done that. Like, it's quite a complex like use of the physics engine. I mean, some of the systems, like the explosion, was an afterthought purely just for like demo reasons, so that like you could see this happening. I mean, like if I run the explosion now, like it works very well. Not getting a great frame rate because of how many actors there are in the scene, but I definitely go with a more clean approach, and like something that you could, you know, just add events in another script, like if you were to implement this in another like use case, because we've got 561 ragdolls currently active, which is a lot, but the idea of this mechanic is that you can have a lot, which is what makes it look good. Like here, for example, you've got a large pile up over here as well. I mean, you can see it looks good how they interact with the hammers and things in the scene. But after they've been there for a while, I don't see there's much need for them to be calculating this constantly. So I definitely in the future would look at maybe some sort of like mesh generator to generate a collision mesh for this whole like collection as one, rather than having the separate, like, I mean, the separate collision boxes for each limb and each head, which just for this like small pile there's a lot of collision objects, which obviously is quite bad for performance. But overall, I'm quite happy with what I've created. I definitely think it fits into like the, you know, the current landscape of how games are going, with like a lot more indie games and things, which for this it would be a very big mechanic. So if someone was able to just download this off the asset store and implement it in their project, that'd be great. And it would definitely save them a lot of time, and you'd have something looking fairly polished from the get-go.